And now, in this moment, I invite everyone to just take a nice, deep, cleansing breath. Breathing in the cool, calming air that surrounds you. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. Allow any tension or stress that's in your body to just be washed away. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take another nice, deep, cleansing breath, breathing in all the love and light. And as you breathe out, allow your body to just relax in this moment. And allow your mind to be here, now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought-fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
Couple of random items before we get started here. One is, no matter how you may feel about eating meat, specifically pork, I know we have a lot of vegans here, a lot of vegetarians here. You have to agree, I think, that Denny's new promotion called Baconalia is about the most clever thing I've heard in a long time. Baconalia, yes. And on a more serious note, two absolute giants in the world of sport have just recently retired. And what's really cool is that, well, one of them is going to continue in a tournament that's starting. And when that's finished, they're going to get married. And their names are Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe. And check out their statistics. Sue Bird has a 20-year basketball career in the WNBA. Megan Rapinoe with the U.S. national women's soccer team, whose World Cup begins in 3 weeks in New Zealand. Check out what they have accomplished in their respective fields, and you will see two people who absolutely found their life's calling, their life's purpose, and yet they're young and now retiring at around the age of 40, I guess, each of them, somewhere in that vicinity. You know, they got this long stretch ahead of them to do good works in the world in terms of social justice and inclusion and opportunity for everyone, which is where their hearts are now. So all praise and all love to Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, American heroes. Okay? We come to a hero from a long time ago, Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is a series on Ralph Waldo Emerson and his work. And if you like it, I mean, it's only been a week. It's hard to tell. And I can't see you under these lights, so you could be scrolling your phones or heading for coffee. I wouldn't know, and certainly don't know about the people at home. But if you like the series, we'll extend it in August, because he's got a bunch more essays to go through and find some really powerful material in, like nature and worship and so on. This month is... we had last week self-reliance, and then today's on spiritual laws. Then we'll have circles and the oversoul. And then on the last Sunday of the month, Reverend Arthur Johnson is going to be our guest speaker, although calling him a guest is crazy because he's family. But he's going to be standing where I am now anyway. And he's going to circle back to self-reliance for his talk on the last. But if you like, we'll do some other Emerson into August. And if you don't like, let me know that too. If you're like, bah, humbug, because I appreciate it when people do that. You know, people say, this is really not, all due respect, this is really not helping me at all. It's like, that's really good news. I collapse in tears and rend my garments and critique my entire life, but happy to change when you want, okay? So today, a little bit on spiritual laws. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I gave you biographical background on him last week. You can watch the talk on, still up on Facebook. You can watch it on YouTube and get that. Or, of course, you can just Google him and you get all the historical background, biographical data you could possibly want. I'll tell you today, one thing about him, he liked to be called Waldo. He named his son Waldo, and that was how he... Now, if your middle name were Waldo, would you want to be known by it? No, maybe not, but he did, so Waldo it is. So Waldo believed he was... We would call him a panentheist, if you've got to call him anything today. We'd call him a panentheist. And here's what a panentheist is. You know, there are theists and deists and atheists and so forth. They're all different. You can split hairs amongst all these different theological interpretations of life. And there's a pantheistic viewpoint that says that the deity is absorbed within every aspect of its creation. That's what pantheism, in short, is. And so, for instance, if I want to have this music stand where my notes are, behave. So I had one time, I put too many books on it while I was giving the talk. It just settled to the floor. That was funny. That was years ago. Anyway, if I want, I want to have a good relationship with the music stand, I would create a conversation with the spirit of the thing. The spirit of the thing, that the deity, a piece of the deity, is present within this, as is it in the guitars and the musical instruments, and of course us. And so you create what's called a propitiatory response, propitiatory relationship with objects and beings within creation in the pantheistic viewpoint. Okay? Then there's the transcendentalist or really theistic viewpoint that says that the deity is beyond all creation. It's an unimaginable mystery. And then there's a school of thought that kind of collapses the two into one, and that's called panentheism. And what that says is that the deity is simultaneously immanent and transcendent. The deity is simultaneously present fully at every point within creation and bigger, infinitely larger, than the sum of all creation. So if you take all of creation and you sweep it into a pile, it still doesn't equal the deity. The deity is larger than that. Because the deity contains not only everything in form, but everything in potential. Now that's mighty big. Think about that for a moment. Not just everything in form, but everything in potential. What isn't in potential? Right? Like anything can happen. So anything that could possibly happen is contained within the same system as everything that is happening, as everything that is in form. And this was Emerson's, the term panentheism had not been coined yet, but this was his viewpoint. He practiced a natural panentheistic religion. It was natural because it wasn't a special revelation. It was natural because it wasn't just an elaboration on pre-existing viewpoints, people, and it was sort of syncretic, which means you take a lot of different theories and you put them all in a hat. But it was primarily natural. And a natural religion is what it sounds like it is. You look around. You look outdoors. You go outdoors. You look at the nature of you, the nature of life, the passing of time, and so on. And you see in there certain patterns repeat themselves. And out of these patterns repeating themselves, you posit laws. You extrapolate principles. You say, well, this keeps happening. You know, it's like your ancestors and mine noticed at some point it gets dark every night. Then it gets light again. early on they seem to have thought that this happened because there was this light-bearing object, circling the planet, and it went down and it came up, and then of course later they realized, no, there's a light-bearing object, a light-projecting object around which we move. But they determined at some point that they could trust this. They didn't have to worry that tomorrow, probably some of them did, because there's some people that are really good at worry. And it doesn't matter if a thing has happened over and over again for, a gazillion years. They're still going to sweat it because it's just kind of what they do. But most people were like, okay, I get it that, day will follow night and seasons will turn and so on. And so they began to, by their observation of nature, they began to say, there are principles at work here. It's not a whimsical thing. It's not about whether I'm a good person, whether it rains or the sun shines. There's a principle here. And then science, of course, developed out of this, and more explanations were forthcoming about the details of it. But it's very easy, very simple to build a natural religion out of the observation of nature. As a matter of fact, it's what Emerson, should I call him Waldo, or will that throw you? It's what Emerson encourages us to do. He starts out in this essay by saying, we interfere with the optimism of nature. We've been taught to do this. Nature takes care of herself. But we worry and we pace the floor about things. How is all of this going to happen? We ask questions, he said, before we're ready to hear the answers. There will be a time when we will know what we need to know. To put this in modern parlance, we live outside the now so much of the time. We live outside of the current moment. We're standing in the current moment, but we're not thinking about the current moment. We're not experiencing the current moment. We're having flashbacks from yesterday. Or we're anticipating what's going to happen tomorrow. Y'all were halfway through that song, and I'm still tripping on Jim Croce, who left the earth early, and Jim Croce's body of work. And then I got thinking about how, I think it was last night or the night before, Elton John performed his last live concert, last tour concert, and the Eagles have just announced that they're having and so I'm sitting there and all of this, and then I had to snap back to, whoa, be here now, hear the song. Okay, it's not about the summer of '72 or whatever, it's about what's going on now. Well, we live in the midst of external stimuli which prompt internal reactions, and our eyes glaze over and we go off into these reveries about things. We miss what's happening now. Now, that's not altogether a bad thing, but it is something that we should notice that we're doing, to stay as present in the moment as we possibly can, because that's where nature is doing her work. Nature's often depicted as a she. That goes back to pre-Christianity. Nature is working. He said, through the short ways, the path of least resistance. Nature works by the path of least resistance. The Grand Canyon was once the Colorado River bed, right? It eats through. Up in Virginia, I saw there's one of those bridges where the water's eaten through the thing, created this rock bridge, There are various places around. And it's just the natural passage. The water is going to go where the water's going to go. And if you put something in the way of it, it will eat through it. It's going to take a mighty long time, but that's in human reckoning. And the Earth is really very young as far as planets go, I suppose. And certainly the human species is incredibly young. And so then we get all excited about our institutions, and we say, well, like I told you last week, Waldo was born 27 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, this guy was around really early on, 220 years ago. And we're like, man, that's a long time. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Only from a certain perspective is it the number of generations you can fit into. Well, anyway, this is the kind of stuff that you observe in nature, and you say, well, you can trust these things. I can trust these things. And nature works by the short ways. Why don't I? Why don't I work by the short ways? He speaks of a simple faith. We have a song we sing here from time to time. Ours is a simple faith. I wrote a parody of it one time. They don't like it, but I thought it was good, you know. And because it's such a sweet song, it just begs to have a parody written. But, you know, a simple faith, an uncomplicated thing. He says our young people are unnecessarily bothered with large questions of theology, which only cause, I'm paraphrasing, which only cause anyone to suffer who goes out of their way to think about these things, like original sin, like predestination, like reincarnation, like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. If this troubles you, if this keeps you awake nights, you've done that to yourself. Don't do it anymore. You don't have to. Trust the simple faith. You know, if you want a complicated faith and you want to jazz it up some, sure, great. But don't let it make you nuts. Don't let it make you neurotic. We get neurotic sometimes in our religious expression, you know. Like, for example, were you ever, when you were a little kid, told, God is watching you? God is watching you, right? And whoever told you that thought that was a comforting thing. You'd be, oh, good, God, you know, God's got my six. But instead what happened was it creeped you out. You know, everywhere, right? And it's still, well, we have these things that haunt us sometimes that weren't meant to. It was just put across in a particular way. Okay. So the message here is to look for the simple faith and follow that. Trust your heart. He says, there is a soul at the center of nature and over the will of everyone, so that none of us can wrong the universe. It has so infused itself in strong enchantment into nature that we prosper when we accept its advice. The whole course of things teaches us to have faith. We need only obey. We need only obey. The whole course of things teaches us to have faith. His use of the word enchantment. Enchantment is from the same root as incantation. And it means basically a series of words that are sung in a rhythmic pattern so as to create what we would now call a hypnotic response. It's a spell. It's an enchantment. It's built into nature. You walk around nature, and by nature I don't just mean gardens and things, but you walk through the world and you feel it pulsating with energy. You feel it in music, you feel it, you see it in art, you hear it in voices and laughter. That's the enchantment that's built into the world. God is not far off. We look too far away for reality, said Emerson. We look too far away for it. Where do we look? We look back into the distant past. Well, you know, the ancient people of here believed this and this. Well, that's great. That's historical record, and it's intriguing and so on. But it's not your source. Your source is present today, right now where you are in your life. The source of inspiration. It's right where you are in this moment. It has not dimmed. It has not faded. It has not exhausted itself. We think sometimes that all the saints and sages and mystics that are worth listening to lived a long time ago, Emerson included. But right now, today, the same direct inspiration is available to each one of us if we would but listen. And it says what it constrains us to do is obey. Now, obedience is not a word a lot of us are really comfortable with. And in a new thought setting like this, we're not asking you to obey other humans. This must be made clear. We're not about obeying authority figures. We're not even about obeying tradition. What are we about obeying? The impulses of the heart. See, we know what we want when we listen. And we know what to do about it when we listen further. We know what to do. We ask ourselves, now what's the right thing in this situation? And we haven't even gotten the words put together, and we know. But then we talk ourselves out of it. No, that's inconvenient, or that's, too much trouble, or I don't know what other people are going to think of me. And he goes off on that. Waldo does, about what other people think of you. He shouts, if this chapter, this essay on spiritual laws had one compact theme, it would be this: be and not seem. Be and not seem. So often we're busy seeming. How do you like me now? How do you like me now? I got an email, not an email, a news thing on my feed about, there's this, no, I'm not giving these people free advertising. I'm sorry. There's an online portal coming up where prices will be heavily discounted across a certain well-known platform. I will say no more. And I got an ad, no, not on this stage. And I got so I've been getting reading these articles about when that great come and get it day happens, here's what you should think about snagging. And they have all kinds of like Roombas and, all kinds of electronics and gizmos and stuff like that. And then they had one, there's a new backsplash for your kitchen. Do you have a backsplash in your kitchen? Are you tired of looking at it? Would you like a new backsplash? You could have this kind, and it's peel and stick, and you get this. And the whole thing about it wasn't it's pretty or it's useful or it's durable or it's cheap. No, the whole thing about it was this will impress your guests. And I thought, I'm the one who has to look at the fool thing. At best, how many guests do you take into your kitchen and say, regard the new backsplash? And if you do that, how many of them turn around and look at you and say, I so admire your taste, your choice in this. I bow down before your superior aesthetic value. No, I mean, it's crazy, right? But this is how a lot of it, where he's going with this is how 200 and something years ago this was going on, and had for a long time before that. This is how a lot of people live. Are you watching me do this? This is a performance. This is a performance. I'm going to do a good thing here now, kind of Dickensian, I'm going to give a coin to this child, this poor waif of a lad who, is everybody watching this? This is my act of generosity, And he said, when you go to like a civic event. We had the 4th of July last week. So that kind of thing where people give speeches. And they did this back in his day, probably more than they do. Now it's virtual or something. But, there's a grandstand set up with the bunting and all this, and here comes the mayor, and here comes, this one and that one, and the different people. And he said, he used the word prolix, Prolix, which means endless, pointless talk. It goes nowhere. And people get up, and they're all blah, 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 blah. And he says, this is mind-numbing. This is completely mind-numbing. He says, be yourself. Be yourself. If a person would be themselves and tell the truth, just stand there in their integrity and tell the truth. He said the whole world would. He said the whole world would listen. He said the sick would be carried in litters to that person. A litter like a gurney or something. In other words, people would. It's actually an oblique reference to Jesus, because it said that they lowered the sick out the windows and passed people prone, lying on, stretchers, They passed them through the crowd to get to where the master healer was, and he would do his work. He said, all you have to do is stand there and tell the truth, and the sick will be carried in litters. People will bring to you the deepest problems of their hearts. People will unburden themselves to you if you can just manage to do this. To have this sense of joyful spontaneity in life. Now, one of his better known statements occurs in here. I hear this quoted. I also hear it flung sometimes in other people's faces, okay? And some of you know what I'm talking about. It's the bloated nothingness line. You familiar with the bloated nothing? He says, we must get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. And sometimes in New Thought, you'll hear people say, oh, that's your bloated nothingness. It's not meant to refer to anybody else. It's meant to refer to the self, Like, you know where I'm going with this? Sometimes we get really interested in taking other people's inventory. Sometimes we get, oh, that's your ego there, isn't it? It's like, you don't know, so fall silent. Fall silent. Just hush. Just hush. We're here to do our own work, not each other's. So the bloated nothingness idea, what is the bloated nothingness that we take out of the way? It's that prolific self. It's that self that analyzes and dissects and yada, 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 goes on and on about how things are. I sometimes feel myself doing it, like right now. I must check that low curiosity. But, what we want is direct experience. What we want is without narration, necessarily. They have these things sometimes. They'll say, you've been listening to this song all wrong. You heard that they have lots and lots of examples of this. You thought the lyrics said this and this, but they really said something else, and you thought it was a whole different mood than it really is. And my feeling is, I like the mood that I had wrong. I thought it was a happy song, or I thought it was what it was, and I'd rather have that than have it all explained to me how I ought to feel, because then pretty soon we're explaining art to each other, and that doesn't work. And speaking of art, he says, look, he was kind of an anti-capitalist in a way, because he said, everybody always wants money. He says, we don't have any, talking about his people. He came into money later on as a lecturer and writer, but at the time, he says, the people that he represented, they're poor country people. He said, we don't have any money. We'll bring corn. Farmers will bring corn. Poets will bring poems. Singers will bring music. Merchants have money. Let them bring money. And we say, oh, that's sweet and simple way of looking at things, but today everything costs money. We have to sell the corn to make money. We have to sell the poems to make money, move things along in that way. But he's describing an idealistic standpoint where everybody has what they have. Everybody rises to the occasion in their own way through their own spiritual genius. And that brings me to the bulk of the thing, which I'm going to wrap up with here in the next few minutes, where he talks about three different points on kind of the same thing. He says, each of us has our own vocation. Like a ship in a river, we run into obstructions on every side but one. On that side, all obstruction is taken away, and we sweep serenely over God's depths into an infinite sea. For you, there is a fit place and congenial duties. Place yourself in the middle of the stream of power, and you are conducted without impediment into that. For you, there is a fit place and congenial duties. A lot of times we wring our hands about what am I supposed to do in this life? And I think about those two athletes I shared with you, and Megan Rapinoe, who has her career's been extended by the fact that they're going to play in the World Cup tournament. She's saying, what I'm going to miss most is not what you see. It's not the YouTube highlights. It's not the hoisting of the trophy in this. She said, I'm going to miss the quiet moments with the teammates that nobody sees but us, where we're having issues in our lives, we're having injuries, recuperating from this. We have devastating losses, thrilling wins, and we process this with each other. And that's what I'm really going to miss. And then, she's turning her gaze outward as to where the rest of her life is going to lead. And for her and for you and me and all of us, there is a fit place and congenial duties that is not static. It keeps changing. It keeps melding and molding and flowing and so on and so forth. I've been at the particular job that I have for almost 40 years now, and it's never the same. No two Sundays are the same. I get up here and I talk about stuff, and we sing some songs, and we have, largely the same group of people in the room and online, but it's never a duplicate at all. And I get so much out of preparing these talks that even if I can't imagine it, but even if I didn't have you to share them with, I'd benefit, because I learn and grow, and it makes me, if I'm going to give a series of talks on Emerson, I got to go read Emerson again, because I don't work off Cliff Notes and stuff like that or AI. I've got to, really get the actual book off the actual shelf and leaf through it and so on, And so that direct and immediate experience, there's a fit place and congenial duties for each one of us. If we will just listen, and he says here, it's like there's an impediment on every side but one. And so you go boom, 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 boom. You hit the shores and stuff, but you keep moving, like through, navigating the rapids. And it takes you sometimes through some very interesting countryside, but it deposits you in the place where you can make the greatest difference. Because he says the soul, capital S, which we're going to get into in 2 weeks in detail, the oversoul, over-soul, he calls it, but he abbreviates it here, the soul with a capital S. He says the soul had need of an organ here. We used to have a big organ. We had a Hammond B3 down here for a while, and when Michael Gott was, you remember Michael Gott was here that time, and he said the soul had need of an organ here. And, that's shop talk. You have to have a little Emerson behind you to understand that. The soul had need of an organ here, and you're it, and I'm it. Love had need of a presence here. Beauty, wonder had need of a presence here. And not just an abstract presence, not just a theoretical presence, but a pragmatic presence, a flesh and blood presence, as you, as me. It needed us to be here to do this. To do what? To express more fully our own spiritual nature. How do we do that? Step one, be aware you have one. Be aware you are one. You are a spiritualist. Kennedy Schultz, another great teacher, said, you don't have a spiritual side. People say they want to work on their spiritual side. He said, you don't have a spiritual side. You don't have any other side. It's not a side. You are a spiritual being. That's all there is to you. It's not a hobby. It's not a pastime. It's not a part-time thing. It's the fullness of who you are. To know this about yourself, that we are, as Waldo said, begirt, B-E-G-I-R-T, like belted, begirt with spiritual laws which execute themselves. Some of these spiritual laws include cause and effect, manifestation, attraction, repulsion, so on. The Hermetic laws, as above, so below, as below, so above, they all fall under this category, spiritual laws. And spiritual laws we haven't even discovered yet because we don't need them, and I'll make that the closing point for today, where he says we ask questions before their time has come, and let us be patient And let us trust that the information that we're getting for the moment is the information, all the information that we're going to need. Because any more information than that becomes too much of a weight to carry. It blocks the flow. Just as if you have this constant narrating voice in your head that tells you, out here we have azaleas, and they are the species and genus blah, and they're best fed with blah, and it's, I don't need to know all that. They're growing, they're doing fine. Actually, they're in a dormant period right now, but they'll be back, and it's kind of hot for them, like it is for us too. But we don't need to know how everything works in order to enjoy it. In order to stand in the way of it. So we are begirt with spiritual laws which execute themselves. And what I invite us all to do this week is notice the spiritual laws, the spiritual principles that you are already familiar with. No one else might agree with you that they're as powerful for you as they are, but you know. Okay? And the other thing is become aware of new things as you see recurring patterns display themselves in life. I'm going to wonder if this is a principle. Let's see if it repeats itself. Let's see if let me test the thing. If I, for example, become a nicer person, if I'm a kindlier person, is there going to be a reciprocal response from life? Let me test this as objectively as I possibly can, without skewing the results one way or another, without bringing in a whole story, that gets in the way of it. Let me, as objectively as possible, let me see if life meets me where it finds me, if life responds to me by corresponding. Okay? So let's do that this week, and we'll come back next week for some more on circles. The essay Circles. Let's know together now there is one life, one power, one presence, pure spirit, everywhere, manifesting everywhere, radiant on this beautiful day. It has within it everything that I need to thrive as the being of light that I am. So I trust it. I obey my heart, my inner knowing, my inner compass. It's built into me by the Maker, the Creator, the Fashioner of every part of me, body, mind, and soul. And there's an intelligence and a purposefulness and a great, great, great reservoir of love present through all creation, all of nature, and all of the natural ways of being. I'm now attuned to this. It makes itself known to me. It calls out to me as I pass through this world. And so in ease and trust and understanding and great joy, I let my life unfold, certain that I'm making a difference, certain that I will find, because I now accept, deep contentment, great joy, boundless love for this knowing and its manifestation in form everywhere I turn. I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
And everyone else, welcome back. Thank you for coming and being here yet again. Thank you for your love and your energy and your support. Thank you for your presence, whether you are in the room or online. And we want to especially thank you for all monetary and financial donations that you give to us. It is because of what you give to us that we can be here and give back to you. So thank you for anything and everything you give. We are truly grateful. And I invite you now to say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
You're going to talk about the quiet moments that mean the most. Danielle and I were just having that quick conversation about the fact that we're the little old ladies in the Catholic Church. that everybody kind of watches. When do you stand up? When do you sit down? We were giggling to ourselves about that. So, and actually that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the fact that with Megan Rapinoe, I was in marching band for 6 years. And 4 of those, they bussed us to the away games. Now, they were not quiet moments, but those were the most fun moments. Not that don't get me wrong, we loved the performances. We loved the performances. But it was that time on the bus, or that time in the band room before and after that's where we bonded as a band. Those are the moments that mean the most. So when we go into treatment, I'm going to invite you to remember those moments in your life. It's not the performance. It's all the time in between where our life really is lived. All right, so I'm going to go back to those quiet moments, those moments in between the performances, which, like I said, that's where our life is lived. We spend a lot of time getting ready for the performance, and then the performance is over like that. But that's where our life is lived. What are you doing in those moments? Well, I have a suggestion for you. Get comfortable in the presence of Spirit. If you're comfortable in the presence of Spirit in those moments, then you know Spirit is with you in the big moments. Because that's when we do the work, in those small moments in between. And then when the big moments come, we know. So know with me that there is one presence, one life, one love, one power. And through each of us, that power flows. And it is a good remembrance that the power does not come from us, but through us. So when you step up into those big performances, it is not your power that you are using. It is the one power of which you are made. That love flows through us. We live that life. We are the physical manifestations of that presence. So as we go about our day, our week, our month, our year, that we are aware in the quiet moments of that Spirit flowing through us, that we are conscious of it, and that we are consistently calling upon it in the quiet moments. So when the big moment happens, it's automatic reflex that the Spirit just flows through whatever it is that you are choosing. Spirit is with you. Spirit is in you and through you, as you. This is the knowing. And I know this with all my heart, with everything that I am. And I know it about each and every one of you in this moment and in every moment. And I know it with gratitude. And I gratefully release my word into Spirit. And I release it with the gratitude for this teaching, for this community, for our ministers, for our practitioners, for our musicians, for the technology, for each and every one of you. And I relax, release it with love, and know that it is so. And so it is.
Say it with me now. Something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
And I love it.
And so it is.
So it is.